Thank you for joining us today. I hope I don't look too small on the camera right now. I'm just stuck in this view right now. Hopefully you can see something of me. My name is Kristen Frieda, and I work for Bolton Street Programs alongside Wagner, which is a program that I'm sure many of you on this call today are familiar with. I'm here with Debbie McLaughlin, who also works at Bolton Street Programs. And then we are joined with Justine DelPrade, who is the Director, Sales and Marketing, Tyler Round, VP of Customer Success at Elpha Secure, along with Gordon Mallon, COO and co-founder from Elpha Secure. Today we will be discussing cybersecurity and its impact on the healthcare field. Justine, can you go to the next slide? Okay. So real quick, I also have Lana Gorman on this call as well. Lana Gorman is the program underwriter for Wagner. She is the one that handles your general liability and professional liability needs. If you have any questions about that coverage, she's also here to answer any questions that you have at the end of this presentation. And I just want to throw this out there for those of you who may not know, cyber coverage is not included in this program. So this would be very beneficial for you to learn about and see if perhaps it's something that you might like to pursue. So from there, I'm going to pass it off to Justine DelPrade to begin.
Thank you, Kristen, for the warm introduction. I'm happy to be speaking to all of you. I'm sure, as most of you know, the healthcare industry is the #1 targeted by cyber criminals. And that's largely due to the severity of the consequences that result from a cyber attack. The three main things that we focus on when we're talking about healthcare and cyber is going to be data breaches, ransomware, and litigation proceedings. First is because data breaches basically make up 30% of all the claims that we see in the healthcare in regards to cyber crimes. The second is ransomware, because it's about 72% of the incidents that are now resulting from also data breaches, that our data is leaked from the ransomware attacks. And then the third is the litigation surrounding it all. Obviously, it comes at a very high cost due to the nature of the information that's being captured from the healthcare system. So the best way to think about it is when I go to the doctor, or you guys go to the doctor, right? And you walk up to the front desk and you're asked to fill out a bunch of forms. The bare minimum information that you're going to be filling out on those forms is going to be your date of birth, credit card information, your insurance information, address, and emergency contact. Thinking about it from that perspective, I mean, that's basically a cyber criminal's dream, is gaining all that information in one shot. It's privileged information, which means it has to be protected. So this is why most of it, the healthcare industry is targeted by 50%. Now, for a lot of the small businesses that are in the healthcare sector, they have not yet put the right controls or cyber security checks in place, unlike the larger ones like hospitals and so on and so forth. So it's much easier for the cyber criminals to penetrate a small business within the healthcare sector than it would be for the larger. Data breaches alone in 2021 for the healthcare small business sector was up to 40 million in patient records. That's extremely high and exorbitant, and it's something definitely to think about. Ransomware healthcare, the highest average initial demand is about 4.6 million on average. And they know that that payment is going to be given due to the nature of it, right? Because it's protected information. And we all know what would happen if that information was leaked and given to the dark web. So both of these have led to, exorbitant amounts, and then you're sued for astronomical fees, which the average cost for a suit for litigation is about 4.6 million as well. Hold on. So what are the vulnerabilities, cyber attacks in healthcare? So we're most particularly concerned with, the diversity of threats. And obviously not just from the systems, right? We're not only concerned about that, but you have patients' health and their safety in your hands. So if a cyber attack were to happen, God forbid anything else, you have somebody's life in your hands, right? If a machine is going to be affected by it. So it's not just the information that we're kind of discussing here. So the three reasons why most healthcare organizations are attacked by criminals is obviously due to the patient information, right? The medical and billing, because they could put that on the dark web and they can do it fairly quickly and sell it for an exuberant amount of money. The second part is going to be the ransomware aspect to it. The ability to lock down any kind of patient payments and machines, which is obviously going to scare everyone, right? If you're not able to access that patient information. And then the third would be the medical devices, something to think about. I don't think a lot of us think about that, but kind of if you were able to tap in, there was a great episode on Grey's Anatomy actually just last night where they had a ransomware attack happen and they did exactly that. All the machines in the ER started looking like they were all in AFib. So imagine if that happens, what kind of panic that's going to set. And not being able to know what's really going on and patients' vitals and so on and so forth. So it really can cause quite severe consequences. So I want to give you a claim scenario that we have from one of our, not our insureds, but from one of our underwriters who gave us this. It's just to kind of overview and kind of show you what it looks like today. So basically an employee just opened a phishing email and a ransomware attack happened. The cyber criminal locked and encrypted all their files and then threatened to sell all the information that they had also on the dark web, and also unwilling to release all the patient records until that ransomware payment was made. They obviously did not have coverage, right? So they had to pay, and it was requested for $500,000. Now, this was an office of about only 5 employees, only 2 doctors, a nurse, and a girl at the desk. Within 6 months, they were under this practice, had to close their doors. So as you can see, this is kind of the worst case scenario. And why were they closing their doors? Well, not only did they have to pay that $500,000 in ransom, but they also got sued by 10 different patients, which then the litigation went on and they were rewarded $25 million. So these are just some of the cyber liability factors that we'd like you to consider, the 10 reasons why you'd want to purchase cyber insurance, right? Obviously, storage vendors, business associates, the fines, the penalties, right? The cost of litigation, the amount that you would have to pay in order for data recovery to happen if a ransomware attack were to happen to that office or any person within the healthcare sector, and also the business interruption, right? The amount of time that it's going to take to get back and the systems up and running and being able to see patients again. Also, your reputation. Once somebody finds out that you have not secured their information, that kind of ruins the trust between you and the business. So that's another thing to think about as well. And of course, the confidential information, right? It was supposed to be protected. And as we discussed, the information that they're collecting is very privileged information, and one that a lot of cyber criminals can sell for a lot of money. And then of course, the extortion costs. The cyber landscape today has changed drastically, especially due to the pandemic, other nation states. So much so that we've seen such an increase in ransomware and such big hits that the government in September of this just last year kind of put into effect how organizations should handle ransomware attacks and the criteria that they should meet. The first is adhere to OFAC, the OFAC list. They just want to see that you're reporting to these government agencies. That way everyone could be tracking it and looking out for it. And then also the controls that they believe that you should have in place in order to prevent ransomware attacks from happening. And those include backups, IR plans, vulnerability scans, and MFA. I'm sure a lot of you, that's very new. So how do small businesses kind of combat that and fulfill those requirements? Well, that's how you get to Cyber Insurance 3.0 and our Bolton Street program here with Elpha Secure. Essentially, we're going to give you the risk mitigation software and help you to get your cyber hygiene in place for your insureds. When co-founders Gordon and Freedom kind of came to be, they decided that, there was a really big gap for the SMEs in comparison to large enterprises and middle market and what they were able to get and how they were able to implement it. So for their perspective, they really wanted to create something that was simple, simple to install, simple to use, to remove the friction between the insured, SMEs, and underwriting, and provide just a cyber hygiene for those who were unable to do so before. So obviously we are a different kind of business model. We have built in the risk mitigation software into our risk transfer. It's going to provide all the tools and controls that, our carriers and other partners want to see from the insured in order for them to be insurable. So it's putting all of that in place. And unfortunately, there's not really, up until this point, which is probably, Gordon can speak to this more so than I can, but that's probably why we started and did it the way that we're doing it in a container. There hasn't really been a Cisco in a box for small businesses. They've had to go and procure these things a la carte, and they haven't been able to do that due to a large number of reasons. Budget costs, they don't really understand, right? The gap of knowledge there. They don't understand what controls they need to have in place or how to even implement them and go down this journey.
Yeah, just to elaborate that a little bit, Justine, is really what Elpha is essentially it's a single solution that takes care of all the small enterprises cybersecurity needs. So really what we've built is all the basically it's all proprietary, but it's all the tools that these organizations need, and we'll talk about it a little bit, or Justine will talk about it, all the basic foundations of a cybersecurity posture. And what we saw when we kind of began thinking about Elpha and the product that we wanted to build for small businesses was the insurance carriers. They were very much so, you rewind 2 years, we were in the kind of the depths of a soft market in cyber. You get what happens with ransomware, and really what happened was the insurance carriers themselves, massive recoil. Anyone that's tried to place a cyber policy recently knows you're paying 300-400% rate increases, tightening terms and conditions, less coverage, etc. But most importantly, what all the carriers are doing now is they're mandating controls. So they're essentially saying you're not even eligible for cyber insurance unless you have a basic foundation. And what we realized was that the small businesses, there's going to be this evolving and developing poverty gap where you need to get an insurance policy in place for all sorts of various reasons, contractual, regulatory, whatever the case may be. But these organizations had no ability to essentially, be able to configure, procure, maintain their own cybersecurity posture. They just didn't have the technical resources nor the budgetary resources. So in order to go spend, make your number up, $5,000-$10,000 on a cyber insurance premium, you had to go out and spend, a ton of money procuring those controls because they were all subjectivities to be able to place that business. And that's essentially what's happened in the last year. You rewind 18 months ago, anyone with quite frankly, anyone with a pulse could get as much cyber insurance limit as they wanted. Today, you need to go through what's known as an RSA, ransomware supplemental application, where you have to answer a ton of questions about your security hygiene, as to the solution to use, etc. We tried to take all the friction out of that by delivering all those tools to the insured at bind. So a very different insurance product with a very different value proposition for your insureds.
Exactly. And just to kind of elaborate them, this is what the container looks like. Okay. It's going to have all these different tools. What's so unique about doing it in the way that we do it in a container is that as threats evolve, we can push new tools to this container without the insured having to actively go in and reinstall and download new software, right? It's going to be for free. We can push it to the container, and that tool is now delivered to this container and actively working to protect the insured. as well as not having to go procure some new tool as threats evolve, right? Because this is an evolving thing that we're dealing with. Cyber is evolving. Every day there's something new. And this allows us to kind of move with it. So first we have,
I was just going to say just a few examples there. So think about it like this: the second you bind a risk with us, your insured gets a welcome email. Tyler and his team walk through the installation process with the insured, and immediately upon installation, which is a 30-second process, my 6-year-old can do it. Immediately upon installation, the endpoint, the laptop, the desktop, or the server, all of a sudden has offsite encrypted backups running. So within an hour, you have all your critical data backed up. We take care of that, encrypted, it's hosted on a third-party provider, a cloud service provider. RDP ports are closed, basically all open ports that are exposed to the internet, where one of the biggest vulnerabilities for threat actors and how most ransomware incidents occur is open RDP ports. We close those, put multi-factor authentication in front of that. We essentially are able to quickly monitor and look for all CVEs, common vulnerable exposures, as well as outdated software, which is usually where most of those CVEs reside, send alerts to the insured on what software needs to be updated, so they can basically get all their applications up to snuff in a matter of days. So it's really this positive feedback loop where immediately upon being on risk, we're making the insured a better risk and giving them all the tools they need to be able to be resilient in today's environment.
yeah, you know, we have to take into account what are driving the losses, right? What are carrier partners really looking for? And 2/3 of that has to deal with the ransomware, and kind of going off of what Gordon said. So just by closing the RDP port, you're reducing it by 60%. So that's a significant amount, right? I love this slide. The reason is because I think it really articulates our value proposition here and what you're getting from Elpha and the Bolton Street program versus what's out in the marketplace right now. So if you have a $3,000 policy, before you can even go and get and they're eligible for that policy, you're going to have to go procure all the tools that we just discussed, right? You're going to have to get critical backups, MFA, patching and version control. And each of those things come at a exuberant cost, right? And by the time you're done, you're looking at about $17,000, and you haven't even purchased a $3,000 policy yet. With Elpha, you're going to purchase that $3,000 policy, and it's going to come with all those controls. Not to mention as we all know, those supplementals right now, no 8-page supplementals, because we're putting the controls in place. We don't need to ask a lot of questions. So we're going to remove that and make it much easier for you, the broker, to go to Debbie and Kristen to get your quotes, and being able to do it with quote and bind within 3 minutes. Also, I'm going to show you right now what it looks like to do an install for the insured. I think it's really important because I think when people see the subjectivity, sometimes they get a little nervous, but I want to reassure you of how easy this install is. So just making sure, let me know when you guys can see it. Can everyone see? Yeah, great.
It's like a dark screen. Yeah, there we go.
So as soon as Kristen and Debbie send you your quote and you tell them that you want to bind, you're going to be providing an email address to them. That email address will receive this email asking them to install it on one endpoint. In order for the policy to incept, within the first 5 days, one endpoint needs to install the software. And then what's going to happen is Tyler and his team, they're going to help get the insured compliant. You will not be responsible for that. He's going to help them get the entire organization compliant. So this is for the first endpoint. You're going to see the email. They're going to click the button. They're going to put in a new password. Update account. Now an SMS text message is going to be sent. They're going to type in the code that they get on that text message.
Hey, Justine, I just want to add in, so all the quotes will go through Debbie and I and Lana. This is direct clients, so when it comes out to secure, they'll just be accessing you strictly for the software, this portion.
So again, so this is what the screen's going to look like. They're going to click add a device. They're going to choose whether they have a Mac or Windows. They're going to click it. And now it's going to begin the installation process. You're going to have to click just a couple, licensing, continue. I agree. Install. Tyler had a password on his computer, so he types it in. And now it's installing. And now you're done. The one endpoint has now been installed. And now the policy is incepted. And now Tyler and his team can help get the rest of the employees on board. If they want to add other employees to do this and they feel like they're more tech savvy than others and Tyler doesn't really need to engage, all they need to do is they can add teammates. And by the way, so now what you're seeing is once it's installed, it's just going to sit there and it's going to work. The insured does not have to actively participate with it. All those tools that we told you about, that's all going to be working in the background and going to be protecting them. The only time you'd have to actively go and participate is if you want to remote desktop it. So this is going to show you how to just add other teammates and how easy it is. So that's where you would get the remote access. Here's your backup. Click manage team, add new teammates. And then you would just, the person can just type in, whoever's doing this, the admin can type in who within the organization they want to install, send the invite, and that same process would happen over again. I know that was a lot, so if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, so essentially through that process, as Justine said, the admin gets an email invite. It's very simple, like you see, a few minutes to download the software, and then you're off and running. And essentially, once that happens, my team actually gets a notification as well, and we help walk you through the rest of the installs and making sure that the rest of the organization gets compliant. And they basically go through the same thing. So just the same install, and everybody's up and running.
Yeah, and you're going to have all these different tools working, and Tyler and his team have been great about getting that done. I have not yet had one complaint from an insured saying this was a heavy lift for me. This is a lightweight tool. It's not meant to trick anyone or create or disrupt the workflow, right? We're just trying to protect you so that you have the proper cyber hygiene in place to be insurable, and if anything does happen, we're able to triage quickly. That is something I do want to touch base on. So as of right now, the way the standard market has been doing it, they've really handled 3 and 4 of the claims process really well, right? The hands-on resolution and the expert part. The uniqueness or differentiator here with Elpha and Bolton Street's program is 1 and 2. That is something that the market has been unable to do, and we are able to do it, and it's through our telemetry tool. Our telemetry tool is basically collecting metadata from the insured, looking at their workflow, and then looking for any kind of anomalous behavior that looks suspicious. So think about it like this. Tyler and Gordon and we log on every single day, although we wish, but we definitely don't, 9 to 5, and we're off. Now on Sunday at 2 o'clock in the morning, our SOC team sees, and our telemetry tool collects data and sees that Gordon has logged in at 2 a.m. on Sunday. So now what's going to happen is the SOC team is going to call Gordon and say, hey, Gordon, did you log in on Sunday at 2 a.m.? Now, depending on what Gordon's response is going to be, that's going to determine what happens next. If Gordon says, no, that was not me, we now triage the claim and start actively escalating it upwards, right? We now know that there's probably been a breach. We're going to look and dive into it. And now we can kind of move through the claims process quickly. This is unique, especially because a lot of cyber attacks, unfortunately, go undetected for very long periods of time, sometimes 90 to 190 days. So by doing this, we are shortening that period of time and we're finding things quicker, if not proactively doing it and finding a claim before it actually even happens and mitigating that threat before it becomes a threat or before it becomes a claim, right? And then it's also, if the claim does happen, we're able to triage quickly so that we minimize the catastrophic nature of it, right? It will be a much smaller claim had you have kind of gone through the process that we've been using, the market's been using thus far. So any questions?